Hi, welcome to the Beliefs Bazaar. My name is Alex. Thank you for joining me. I recently started this channel. As I record this video, it's the end of May in 2025. But I have been studying beliefs and, behavior related to beliefs for about 10 years now, kind of starting when I was getting into recovery from a long time opiate addiction. And the real relevant part of that is that as I was getting into recovery, I had to address the beliefs that I had about what drugs were doing for me, or how I thought that, I believed that I was maybe a better person when I was on drugs, or was, a myriad of other things. I talk about that in another video. But the takeaway was that I had been living for a long time with some very self-destructive beliefs. And so I started engaging with interrogating those beliefs. And, like I said, I had some bad beliefs related to addiction, or related to like drugs and that kind of behavior. But I also started realizing that maybe some of the other ideas that I had were wrong. So I started looking into that. And I also mentioned in another video that I am what I would consider a recovering bigot as well. I had a lot of very prejudiced ideas about all sorts of things. I was never part of a hate group, but I still had sufficiently bad ideas that it affected my preference towards people and my judgment of people based on arbitrary things that had nothing to do with who they were or their personalities. So anyway, all that is to say that I've been looking into beliefs for quite some time now. And I was inspired to start this YouTube channel because I thought that, as I'm still learning, I have some things that I've learned along the way that might be helpful to other people that are struggling with, what to believe, because there's a lot of stuff on the internet. And also just to kind of document my own continuing exploration of the nature of belief and how it affects us all. And I think in the year 2025, we can clearly say here in America that beliefs are having a large impact on our society. And no matter what side of anything that you're on, no matter what your political position or otherwise, I think everyone would agree that there is a lot of disinformation out there, and there's a lot of people that believe information that is perhaps less than true or completely outright false. So I think it's really important that we take a step back and try to prepare ourselves for engaging with content that is perhaps could be misleading. And I think the best approach is to refine our critical thinking skills before we start engaging with content online. And for those that are unaware, critical thinking is the ability to analyze information objectively, identify biases, and draw logical conclusions, ultimately leading to better decision-making and problem-solving. It involves questioning assumptions, evaluating evidence, and considering different perspectives. So the most important thing that I want people to draw from that is to identify your biases. And by that, I mean, it helps to understand where you come from, where your beliefs lie to begin with, and then attempting to set all those aside and approach something anew as if you didn't know any information prior to that. You weren't swayed either direction. And I think that's the step that a lot of people are missing when they say that they're engaging in critical thinking. That does not mean just criticizing someone else's idea and just scoffing at it and then saying, you're wrong, therefore the thing that I think is true instead of that is true. That's not an effective, rational way of thought. So all that is to say, I've been particularly interested in the flat earth movement, I guess you could say. And it's fascinating to me because, in my quest to understand beliefs and the nature of belief, I've stumbled upon this group that I had kind of heard peripherally when I was younger that people thought this was a thing, and I kind of just thought it was a joke and brushed it off. But after watching a lot of this content and a lot of the debunking content and the debunking of the debunking content, I've kind of come to realize that there's a lot of people that really do believe in these things. And then there's some other people that I think are not actually believers that, you know, spin a good yarn, if you will, and are very compelling in their arguments. However, those arguments only work on people that are relatively undereducated. And so, you know, I'm a person who's very willing to be wrong, and I'm very willing to revise my understanding of the world based on new information. So, you know, I did the same with this approach. I came to the table being like, well, is there anything to this? And what I proceeded to watch, and I've watched a lot of videos, so, you know, I'm sure I haven't seen them all. Of course, there's a lot of content out there, but I think I've gotten the gist on kind of some of the main points, and it really just shows a complete either lack or unwillingness to understand the science behind how we know that the Earth is a globe, and the knowledge and everything that went into to us understanding that, you know. And I understand from a clearly just a basic observational standpoint, it really does seem like the Earth is flat, because, you know, humans aren't capable of seeing the curve within our visual range, which, you know, if we're standing on the edge of the ocean at sea level, or, you know, I'm like 6 feet tall or whatever, you know, we can only see 3 miles out in any direction. So, you know, with the size of the Earth, you're not going to perceive that, you know. It's only when we achieve a certain elevation that you can really see it. And so we use other methods to determine that. You know, if it was something that we could clearly observe, there never would have been any conversation about it at all. It would have just been something we all inherently knew. You know, even back when this was being discovered, people were persecuted for saying that the Earth was a globe, because everyone's understanding prior to that was that it was flat. And to counter someone's belief system can be kind of grating, or even just to tell someone that their understanding of reality is untrue, or that there's something they're missing, or, you know, that maybe they're stupid for not understanding something, you know, or even if it's not presented as like that. I certainly used to feel stupid when I would be totally schooled on something that I thought I knew about, and someone would just clear away all my stupidity and enlighten me with the facts. That was something that I usually kind of protested about and would be pretty grumpy about for a minute, until I was like, you know what? Why am I upset about this? They're helping me understand the world better. So I don't really understand the hostility either with people just trying to educate and enlighten people. I really don't think it's useful in these conversations to start out with calling people names or insulting them for, you know, no reason at all, or just calling them stupid because they disagree with you. I don't think that's productive. But what I would like to talk about in this video is that, for me anyways, I don't have a degree from college. I'm not an academic in the usual sense of the word. And you know, it's been a long time. I'm 41 now, and I haven't really taken any math or physics classes since high school. But that being said, when I was in high school, my junior and senior year, I was taking college level math and, you know, like freshman college level physics, like the 100 level classes in physics. And so, you know, for me, it's really, I understand, at least conceptually. I probably couldn't do most of the math now, but I understand conceptually how, like, all these things that scientists describe work, and I also understand how they derived these equations that describe orbital mechanics and all these things. Like, it's not just a reference book that someone, like, just, you know, it wrote down because they felt like it, and we all look to this book because we like it or something. No, these are tried and true equations and physics and laws of nature that explain what happens. And they don't just explain one aspect of it, they explain all aspects of it. They all fit the model. So that's kind of where I'm stuck on with the flat earth thing, is because I'm certainly willing to entertain the idea that I'm wrong about things, but there's just nothing compelling. And what I want to focus on in this video, and I know there's a lot of things out there that people are like, well, we debunk this and that, but I don't find that particularly compelling, because a lot of times the setup for these kind of, you know, grade school level experiments are pretty misguided, and it shows their true lack of understanding of the topic by their. I'm just surprised at how some people think they're going to figure out the shape of the earth based on their little tabletop experiments with flashlights and little pieces of paper and other stuff like that. So that's kind of silly to me. But anyways, I guess as the title of this video suggests, the challenge for flat earthers is to create a mathematical model that describes anything, really. Give us some equations that will predict the path of the moon the next time it goes overhead, or how long till the next eclipse and what the path will be. These are things that people figure out with the science and the data that we have. And for people watching, unless you're a flat earther who feels like they might be able to contend with this information, for people that aren't in one camp or the other, I totally invite you to check out this Wikipedia page on orbital mechanics. It has a lot of the equations on the or just for various different aspects of orbital mechanics and all of that kind of stuff there. I'll link to this in the notes. Like I said, I'm a little rusty on the math. I don't know if I'd be able to without some practice or even relearning some of these things, I wouldn't be able to do any of the higher level equations. The one that I was looking at right here on the landing page for this is this, which shows a satellite in a perfectly circular orbit, and essentially it just needs a sufficient velocity to counteract the gravity pulling it down. And that's what you see when people are floating in the space station at what is commonly referred to as zero gravity, but it's actually not zero gravity, it's free fall, where the vehicle that they're in is moving fast enough that it stays in the same position relative to the Earth, because the Earth is pulling down at a specific acceleration, and the vehicle is moving at a rate that keeps it from falling towards the Earth, just like that diagram was showing. So that's how we have satellites. And if you want a geosynchronous satellite, meaning that a satellite that stays above the same position in the Earth, it just needs to be far enough away from the Earth and moving at a sufficient speed for the mass of the object, such that it will rotate, or rather, it will follow a path in space at the same rate that the Earth is turning. And so it's actually moving very fast, but because of the distance, it stays synchronous with the Earth, and the orbit will be dictated by how heavy the object is. And that's pretty much it, actually. How heavy the object is will determine where it needs to be and how fast it needs to be going to stay directly above a spot on Earth. The other satellites that, you don't necessarily need it to be geosynchronous, it can just orbit the Earth. Those are just, determining where you want it to orbit, its mass, and how fast it needs to go to maintain that orbit. So those are just kind of, we have equations for that. Like this one here, or that's not an equation, rather, but it is a diagram that shows the two forces that are involved in the equation, one being gravity and the other being the velocity of the object. We have math that describes that. It predicts the outcome into the future. I haven't seen anything like that in the many hours of flat Earth content that I've watched. There's no equations, there's no predictive anything, and the solutions that flat earthers come up with to describe, maybe the movement of the moon or the movement of the sun, that's not the same thing that describes the other thing. Like, the thing they say to describe the sun does not also describe the moon or the stars, or why we see them the way we do, or even the planets and why we see them the way we do. It doesn't explain anything. I mean, there's certainly explanations given. People say that it happens for this, that, or the other reason, but there's no math backing that up. There's no actual data that proves that those assumptions are even real. So I'm hoping that, I'm not trying to be antagonistic with this video. I'm just trying to propose that people that talk about the flat earth, and I realized like not everyone's going to be able to do the math. So if you can't do the math and you can't come up with an accurate mathematical description of how these things happen, maybe you shouldn't be so quick to jump into the bandwagon of this is a thing. And also the last thing that I'll say, and something that I like to say in most of my videos, is just because you can't understand something or won't take the time to understand something, it does not make it a conspiracy. I understand sometimes people don't get stuff. I don't get a lot of things. I don't understand quantum mechanics, but it doesn't mean that it's not real because people are doing things with quantum mechanics. They're making quantum computing devices. They're using, quantum entanglement for experiments, and, the particle accelerator machines are doing experiments that are observable on the quantum level. This is a real thing. It happens in real life. I don't understand it, but that doesn't mean it's not real, right? And I just hope that everyone else will have the humility to just say, hey, you know what? I don't understand this thing, but I'll look to people that have spent their whole lifetime and careers researching these things and ask them how they came up with these ideas, because that's really what it comes down to. We're not just saying a thing happened and then just hoping that everyone believes it because we can point to some pictures or some observations that back that up. No, this is, it fits everything that happens, and there is procedure and methodology that went into determining what those equations and those observations mean, and how we can then predict future observations and whatnot. Like, the methodology is there. It's not just a book that we draw answers from. You can learn how to discover these things yourself, the same way that scientists did in the past. So I really encourage everyone to kind of set aside your preconceived notions about anything, even if that's to say, even if you believe that the earth is a globe, but you don't know why, look into it. I encourage that, because the information is there and the scientists are there, and they're enthusiastically willing to tell you how we determine all these things, how we come up with this information, and all of that. So anyway, The Beliefs Bazaar is the channel, and thank you for watching.